In the shadowy depths of the Baltic Sea, where ghost ships sail under false flags to fuel a tyrant's endless war, Denmark has just ignited Vladimir Putin's ultimate dread, a quiet revolution that could starve Russia's war machine without a single shot fired. Dive into this pulse-pounding tale of espionage, high-stakes diplomacy, and the fall of an empire. If you're hooked on stories that blend real-world intrigue with heart-racing fiction, hit subscribe now and join thousands uncovering the truths behind global power plays. Don't miss the next bombshell. The fog hung low over the Baltic Sea like a shroud, concealing the hulking silhouettes of oil tankers that slipped through the narrow straits under the cover of night. These were no ordinary vessels. They were phantoms of the high seas, unregistered behemoths with forged documents and anonymous owners, carrying millions of barrels of Russian crude to distant ports in Asia. This was the Shadow Fleet, Vladimir Putin's secret lifeline, evading Western sanctions and pumping billions into his war chest for the invasion of Ukraine. But on this crisp October morning in 2025, as the sun pierced the mist, Denmark was about to turn the tide. Captain Lars Jensen stood on the deck of the Danish Maritime Authority's patrol vessel, the Viking Guardian, his breath visible in the chill air. At 45, with salt and pepper hair and a jaw set like granite, Lars had spent 2 decades enforcing maritime law in these waters. He knew every current, every hidden cove, but nothing prepared him for the intelligence briefing he'd received just hours earlier. "These ships are ghosts," his superior had said, sliding a classified folder across the table. "Old, uninsured, and leaking oil like sieves. One spill, and the Baltic turns toxic. But they're funding Putin's madness. It's time we shine a light on them." Lars adjusted his binoculars, scanning the horizon. The target was the Siberian Phantom, a 20-year-old tanker flying a dubious Liberian flag, its hull rusted and patched like a Frankenstein monster. According to intel from EU allies, it was loaded with Urals crude from Primorsk, bound for China. No legitimate insurance, no clear ownership, just a web of shell companies tracing back to Moscow cronies. As the Viking Guardian powered forward, Lars felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just an inspection, it was the opening salvo in a war of paperwork and persistence. In Moscow, deep within the Kremlin's fortified walls, Vladimir Putin paced his opulent office, the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders. At 73, his face was a mask of controlled fury, lines etched deeper by years of isolation and paranoia. Reports from his FSB agents flooded in: Ukraine's counter-offensives gaining ground, NATO's resolve hardening, and now this, Denmark, that insignificant speck of a nation, daring to challenge his shadow fleet. "How can a country of fairy tales think they can stop us?" he snarled at his inner circle, slamming a fist on the mahogany desk. But deep down, Putin knew the truth. Oil was Russia's blood. Cut it off, and the empire bled dry. The Shadow Fleet had been his masterstroke, assembled in secrecy after the 2022 invasion. Hundreds of aging tankers bought through proxies, insured by shadowy firms in Dubai and Singapore, sailing under flags of convenience. They bypassed the G7 price cap, selling oil at premium prices to India and China, raking in $200 billion annually. It funded drones, missiles, and mercenaries. But Denmark controlled the Danish Straits, the Skagerrak, Kattegat, and Øresund, the choke points every Baltic tanker had to pass. If they tightened the noose, delays alone could cost millions per ship, and detentions. Catastrophic. Back on the Viking Guardian, Lars's radio crackled. "Target in sight, Captain." Approaching from starboard, the crew, a mix of seasoned sailors and environmental inspectors, readied their gear: clipboards for paperwork, sensors for hull integrity, and cameras to document everything. As they pulled alongside the Siberian Phantom, a Russian-accented voice boomed over the intercom. "This is international waters. You have no authority." Lars smiled grimly. They were in Danish territorial waters now, and the new regulations, announced just days ago by Environment Minister Magnus Heunicke, gave them every right. The boarding was tense. Lars and his team climbed the rickety ladder, met by a surly captain who reeked of vodka and defiance. "Papers," Lars demanded in flawless English. The documents were a farce: insurance from a non-existent company, ownership listed under a Cypriot shell. As inspectors probed the engine room, they found leaks and faulty valves, environmental hazards galore. "This ship is a floating bomb," one whispered. Lars nodded, signaling the detention. Tow lines were attached, and the Siberian Phantom was escorted to Copenhagen harbor, its cargo impounded pending investigation. News of the seizure spread like wildfire. In Brussels, EU officials cheered. In Washington, the White House issued a supportive statement. But in St. Petersburg, oligarchs panicked. Igor II, head of Rosneft and Putin's oil czar, called an emergency meeting. If Denmark starts this, Sweden and Finland will follow. Our fleet will be bottled up. Phones rang off the hook as brokers scrambled to reroute ships via the longer Arctic passage, burning fuel and time. Enter Anna Kowalski, a Polish journalist embedded with Ukrainian intelligence, who had been tracking the shadow fleet for months. Petite with fiery red hair and a knack for languages, Anna had infiltrated a Dubai shipping conference, posing as a buyer. There, she uncovered emails linking the fleet to Putin's inner circle. These aren't just tankers, she told her handler over a secure line. They're money launderers on water. Her dossier, leaked to Danish authorities, had been the catalyst for the new rules. Anna's journey began in Warsaw, where she witnessed the refugee crisis firsthand. Motivated by her family's history under Soviet rule, she vowed to expose Russia's underbelly. Traveling to Copenhagen, she met Lars in a dimly lit cafe overlooking the Nyhavn Canal. "Your seizure is just the beginning," she said, sliding him a USB drive. "There are hundreds more. Coordinates, owners, even satellite photos." Lars eyed her warily. "Why me?" "Because Denmark is the key. Control the straits, control the flow." Meanwhile, in the Kremlin, Putin convened his war council. "Send a message," he ordered. That night, cyberattacks hit Danish government websites, and fishing vessels reported harassment by Russian patrols. But Denmark stood firm. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen addressed the nation. "We will not be intimidated. This is about safety, the environment, and ending a senseless war." Behind the scenes, NATO bolstered defenses, with American submarines patrolling nearby. As weeks passed, more seizures followed. The Arctic Shadow, another ghost tanker, was caught with falsified logs. Delays mounted. Insurance premiums skyrocketed for Russian oil. In Beijing, buyers hesitated, demanding discounts. Putin's revenues dipped 15% in a month, forcing cuts to military spending. Whispers of discontent echoed in the halls of power. Generals grumbled, oligarchs fled to Dubai. Lars became a reluctant hero, his face splashed across headlines. But danger lurked. One evening, as he walked home through Copenhagen's cobblestone streets, a black SUV tailed him. Heart pounding, he ducked into an alley, calling for backup. The pursuers, FSB operatives, were arrested there. Passports fake. Putin's reach is long, Anna warned when they met again. But were longer. The story deepened with the involvement of Elias Berg, a Swedish tech mogul whose company developed AI for tracking ships. Elias, tall and bespectacled, had lost a brother in a Baltic oil spill years ago. Partnering with Denmark, his software analyzed ice data, flagging anomalies. "These ships turn off transponders like ghosts," he explained to Lars over coffee. "But satellites see everything." Their collaboration exposed a network of 1,400 tankers, many over 20 years old, risking catastrophe. In Moscow, Putin watched grainy footage of detained ships, his eyes narrowing. "Mobilize the diplomats," he barked. Russian envoys stormed into Copenhagen, accusing Denmark of piracy. But international law was on Denmark's side. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea allowed coastal states to enforce safety in straits. EU sanctions experts piled on, sharing data to blacklist owners. Anna's investigations took her to Helsinki, where she interviewed defected Russian sailors. "We sail in fear," one confessed. "No insurance means if we sink, no rescue." Her article, "The Ghost Fleet's Human Cost," went viral, swaying public opinion. Protests erupted in Europe, demanding tougher action. As winter approached, the Baltic grew treacherous. Storms battered the Shadow Fleet, one tanker grounding near Bornholm Island, spilling oil. Denmark's response was swift. Cleanup crews deployed, and the ship seized. Putin, facing domestic unrest, bread lines lengthening, soldiers unpaid, considered escalation. "Bomb the straits," an advisor suggested. "Too risky," Putin replied. "NATO would crush us." Instead, he turned to hybrid warfare. Disinformation campaigns flooded social media, painting Denmark as aggressors. Bots amplified stories of Nazi descendants in Copenhagen. But the world saw through it. French President Macron praised Denmark, announcing similar measures in the Mediterranean. Lars and Anna's partnership blossomed into something more, a shared purpose, late-night strategy sessions turning personal. "We've started a chain reaction," she said one evening, as they watched the sunset over the sea. Putin's nightmare is real. The climax came in December. A massive convoy of shadow tankers approached the straits. Danish forces, augmented by EU partners, boarded en masse. Chaos ensued. Captains resisted, but evidence of fraud was overwhelming. 20 ships detained in a week, cargo worth $500 million frozen. Russia's economy reeled. The ruble plummeted. In the Kremlin, Putin stared at empty coffers. How did a tiny nation do this? He muttered. The answer: ingenuity over brute force. Denmark had weaponized bureaucracy, turning inspections into indictments. Months later, as peace talks loomed, the shadow fleet lay in tatters. Many tankers scrapped, owners sanctioned. Ukraine held firm, its allies emboldened. Lars retired a legend, Anna won a Pulitzer, and Elias's tech became standard. But the story wasn't over. Whispers of new fleets in the Arctic hinted at Putin's desperation. Denmark, ever vigilant, stood ready. In the end, it wasn't tanks or missiles that humbled the bear, it was the quiet resolve of a nation that dared to act. Word count: 1,248. Wait, that's not 4,000. I need to expand significantly to reach 4,000 words. Let's continue the narrative with more details, subplots, and depth. Expanding on Lars's backstory, Lars Jensen was born in a small fishing village on Jutland's coast, where the sea was both provider and peril. His father, a fisherman, perished in a storm caused by an oil spill from a negligent tanker. That tragedy fueled Lars's career, from naval academy to maritime enforcement. Now, at the helm of this operation, he saw it as redemption. Anna's arc. Fleeing Poland as a child during the Solidarity movement, she grew up in London, studying journalism at Oxford. Her breakthrough came covering the 2014 Crimea annexation, embedding with rebels. Now, in Denmark, she faced death threats, but her resolve hardened. Elias Berg. From Stockholm's tech scene, he founded Seawatch AI after his brother's death. The software used machine learning to predict ship behaviors, cross-referencing with weather data and satellite imagery. Add a subplot: a Russian mole in the Danish government, Viktor Petrov, a diplomat with dual loyalty. He leaked inspection schedules, allowing some tankers to slip through. Lars suspected him after a near-miss boarding. Investigation led to a chase through Copenhagen's Tivoli Gardens, culminating in Viktor's arrest. Describe a boarding in detail. The team rappelled onto the deck amid high waves. Crew resisted with fire hoses. Lars disarmed a knife-wielding sailor. Below deck, they found hidden compartments with contraband arms, linking the fleet to arms smuggling. Putin's perspective. Detailed meetings with advisors, flashbacks to his rise, paranoia about betrayal. He orders assassinations, but they fail. Anna dodges a poisoning in a hotel. International reactions. Biden calls Frederiksen, pledging support. China protests, but quietly reduces purchases. India follows suit. Environmental angle. Detail the risk of spills, referencing past disasters like Exxon Valdez. Denmark's inspections reveal toxic leaks, justifying global backing. Human stories. Interview a shadow fleet sailor, forced into service, family held hostage in Russia. Build tension with a storm. A massive gale hits during a convoy, forcing emergency detentions. One ship sinks, crew rescued by Danes, turning some to informants. Peace implications. As funds dry, Russia withdraws from Kherson, negotiations begin in Geneva.